is Bashar said one of the gifts that you're going to be given as humanity when you do have open contact is your complete history of the things that you know nothing about that have happened on this planet for thousands of years, and you're going to be given the recordings of all of that stuff so that you know what your history is.
We've talked a lot on the show. We've talked about a lot of different subjects, but I wanted to kind of dive in this conversation about a few topics that people keep asking me about, and I'd love to hear your point of view and also what Bashar thinks or has said in the past about it.
Sure.
Right now, there seems to be a lot of insanity going on in the world. That could be said of every decade. I mean, and you've been around long enough, I've been around long enough that we've seen, I remember the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, everyone had their own little flavor, but it seems like it's always been this way in many ways. There's always been wars, there's always been insanity, but why are people feeling it so much more now? And what makes this time different than others?
Well, I think globally, we're seeing more stuff happening because we're so interconnected. And so I think we're feeling the impact of knowing what's going on around the entire planet and seeing all the crazy stuff all at once. And so it feels very overwhelming. But I also think it is an indication of the end of one cycle and the beginning of another cycle. And as Bashar sort of intimated, it's like we're getting everything out of our system, out on the table, so that we can really see, do we prefer this? Do we not prefer that? What direction do we really want to go in? So it's kind of like we're not hiding anything anymore. Everyone is very blatant about what they believe and what they think. And we're seeing the positive, the negative, the neutral, and every possible permutation of that all at once. So I think because we're seeing the beginning of what Bashar really called the splitting prism, where a lot of parallel versions of Earth already coexist. And depending on our own vibration, that is sort of navigating us in whatever direction our vibration is reflective of on those different versions of Earth. So, so he's saying you are now finally actually seeing two different realities where two people on different sides honestly believe that what they're saying is the truth, even if it seems completely polarized to what the other side is saying. And both of those are real realities. And they will get farther and farther and farther and farther apart until in the years to come, each side will no longer experience the other side at all. So I think that's to some degree what's happening.
It seems that we're so divided right now. Like even when I was growing up, I mean, the right and the left could work together. We might disagree fundamentally on things, on worldviews, but we could cooperate to get things done. There is just nothing being done now. And and it's almost a demonization of the other side.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's become very cut and dried because you're actually seeing the effect of two completely different realities, not just philosophically, literally two different realities. We happen to be capable of still seeing each other right now, but that's getting more and more difficult because eventually, like I said, in the years to come, whatever vibrational frequency you are, whatever pathway you are charting into the different versions of Earth that are more and more representative of what you choose and what you prefer, eventually you will no longer be close enough to the other reality to be able to see them anymore. It'll be whatever you choose, you're going to find pretty much similar like-minded people in that reality as you continue in that direction, whether positive, negative, or what have you. So it's really about this being the time of choice and making the choice that is really what you want to align with, because that is what you're crystallizing as you move forward. And eventually that's all you'll be able to experience. Bashar has kind of likened it in the past to a bunch of trains leaving the station in different directions. So the tracks are going off in all sorts of different directions. For a while, the tracks are kind of close and you could hop from one train to another if you change your mind. But as they get farther and farther apart, it'll be more challenging to get on another train because it will be going so fast and it'll be so far away from the other tracks that you won't even know there are other tracks to go to.
So let me ask you this question. Let's say I'm on one train and you're on the other train, and in my reality, there's a Daryl and there's an Alex. And you and I just happen to see things in a different way. Let's say you're going off to the right, I'm going off to the left. Let's just say for that. And we're off. In my reality, as I start finding these more like people, there's still a Daryl that lives in my reality. Is there not? You mean so? Not necessarily. So talk to me about that.
Again, only if our vibrations are somewhat generally similar overall, no matter what it is that we may slightly differ on. You have to have a general vibration in order to still create your version of another person. Because remember, we're not seeing each other directly. We're creating our versions of each other in our own reality. If my reality and your reality become too different vibrationally, you may not perceive a version of me in your reality and vice versa. Now, whatever the mechanism is that we rationalize as to why that happens can be very different. You could say, oh, he died. Or, I don't know, we just lost contact and I haven't seen him in years. I don't know where he is. I can't reach him. Somehow it's all disconnected and there's no way to reach this person. So it can happen in a number of different ways, but the basic effect is we're not in each other's reality anymore, and we're not creating versions of each other in our reality anymore if the vibrations are too different.
Another question I get asked a ton about is AI and the effects of technology and technological advancements and how it connects to our spiritual evolution in the coming decades, because AI in the technology is growing so fast. It's like monthly, daily, weekly things are changing. It's so insanely fast. I can only imagine what it's going to be like in 2 years.
10 years, 5 years, yeah. But considering AI, Bashar has said something very interesting about that. And he is suggesting that we need to take two different paths with AI. On one hand, the AI that we're creating so far is something that we program. And he's saying you don't want that programmable AI to become self-aware. Basically, it's a great tool and it can be extremely beneficial for humanity in the future, as it already has been. It still has glitches that have to be worked out. But basically he's saying you don't want a programmable AI to become self-aware, because if you do that, what you have actually created is a slave. Because now you have something that's self-aware that is forced to follow your orders. What you want is the other path. Just leave that as a tool. If you want true sentient AI, then create a device that allows consciousness to express itself through that device exactly in the same way that consciousness expresses itself through a human brain, and let it be autonomous and have all the rights that a human has. And because it's true intelligence, it will work in whole systems and never even think about the idea of getting rid of any part of the system, like, oh, I'm going to get rid of humanity. It just wouldn't think that way. But you have to allow that to be an autonomous being. So all you're doing is creating a medium through which consciousness that exists in the universe can express itself in exactly the same way. You're creating an organic body with a brain, and then consciousness expresses itself to you as a living being. And what Bashar has actually said about that, he said, when you create that version of AI, you will actually be communicating with your own higher mind. So he's suggesting both of these paths simultaneously, rather than trying to make this one, programmable AI, become self-aware.
And how does that affect all this technology advancements that we're going through? How does that affect our spiritual evolution?
Well, he's always said, look, your technological progress mirrors the changes that have already existed in your consciousness. You can't have any kind of technological breakthrough unless your consciousness has made a shift first to be able to incorporate that idea and that understanding. But the fact that we are capable now of exploring the idea we call artificial intelligence, which to Bashar is kind of a misnomer, because he's saying intelligence is not artificial. The device may be artificial, but intelligence exists apart from physical reality. Consciousness exists apart from physical reality. So the fact that we are at a point where we're starting to work with that and investigate that idea shows how much more expanded our ideas of consciousness are, and that we are approaching the point where we really are starting to realize consciousness is not a product of physical reality. Physical reality is a product of consciousness. So it is getting to the point where I think ultimately we will not be able to separate what is technology and what is spirituality. So in this case, any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from spirituality. The two are blending, and I think AI is one of the fields where we will first encounter that crossover between physical reality, matter, and energy, and spirituality and consciousness. So I think that's why we're doing it. That's why it's now the leading cutting edge of technology in many ways, is because it's all about the next step in our understanding of what consciousness is.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. Now, what is Bashar's view of the outcome of all of these elections? Because it's not just the US. I mean, I heard 50% of the countries in the world are having elections this year. It seems that a lot of the older systems are starting to show cracks, are starting to flounder a bit. I always use the Catholic Church as an example. That definitely does not have the power that it once was, or once did. It was almighty at one point. It was essentially the Roman Empire transformed. Right. So where does Bashar and you as well see the balance of not only power, but of frequency shifting in these coming years and decades, of these old systems coming down, these new systems coming up? What's your take and Bashar's take on it?
Well, both Bashar and actually a couple of very well-known psychic people who have pretty good track records have basically said that we're going through a 30-year reset from 2020 to 2050. And it is the resetting of humanity. We're at the end of a cycle, the beginning of a new one, and we are now being given opportunities to go in entirely new directions. So and again, remember, as Bashar says, we never actually changed the world we're on. We are constantly shifting to new parallel versions of Earth. So again, the changes that we see are not happening to the Earth we used to be on. That is gone. We are constantly shifting to a new Earth. This is a new Earth, this is a new Earth, this is a new Earth, literally, not metaphorically. We are shifting billions of times a second. In the course of this conversation, we have gone through billions of parallel realities. That's what time is. Time is a side effect of going through these different realities that our consciousness focuses on, like a projector light going through frames on a film strip. It just goes so fast we don't see the blur. We just don't know that it's shifting frame by frame by frame billions of times a second. So it's going to go in whatever direction is determined by the energy of each and every individual person. They're going to experience their own reality going in whatever direction is commensurate with their vibrational frequency. So that's what he sees, that's what I see happening.
And I think I've asked you this before, but for people who didn't see those other episodes, the Mandela effect is us starting to see those shifts in our realities.
Yes, I do believe some of them are indicative of the fact that two different people literally are remembering two literally different parallel reality histories simultaneously. And that's part of the overlap that I'm talking about that's still going on. There is bleed through and leakage from different parallel realities because our consciousness is expanding enough to contain the idea that there's more than one reality. And as soon as our consciousness starts considering that, we start experiencing some leakage, some bleed through from other realities. It's like we widened our bandwidth, because physical parallel realities are only separated by bandwidth, a frequency of energy. Suddenly, like we have a television where suddenly you're looking at the overlap of 2 or 3 different programs on the same screen at the same time. And I think that's responsible for other phenomena too, like deja vu and things like that. I'm perceiving that, and so it suddenly feels like, wait a minute, I've seen this before, when it finally catches up, because you have seen it before in the other parallel reality, and your reality finally caught up, and so now it feels familiar, like you know exactly what's going to happen because you've seen it before. So that could be one reason for deja vu. There are others, but they all involve the idea of multiple dimensions.
Now, what is your and Bashar's perspective on the future of religion? Because religion has done a lot for us over the years, good and bad, but it seems like a lot of the older systems are starting to crumble, and even the new generations, you know, are not flocking or not don't believe in the same dogma and things like that. So what do you think it is?
You know, if you want a ritual, that's fine. If you use it as a permission slip to make yourself connect to something better, that's fine. If it works for you, that's fine. But it's really, from my perspective and Bashar's perspective, about coming back to a spiritual path, a direct connection to source, rather than having to have a middleman or a middlewoman tell you what is going on with God, goddess, all that is, whatever you want to call it. It's about knowing that we are aspects of existence, that we are reflections of the one, of source. So it's a more direct relationship to have a spiritual relationship rather than a religious one. It's sort of a one step removed thing in religion, because you're sort of putting a ritual in between you and a direct connection to source. But again, if it works for people to get them into a proper state, that's fine. It's just that Bashar looks at all of that as what he calls a permission slip. So that means you're using a technique, you're using a tool, a discipline, a ritual, an object to give yourself permission to be more of who you are, to be more connected to source in whatever way, shape, or form you want to label that. Whereas spirituality is simply without the middleman, without the ritual. It's just a direct feeling, a direct connection, a direct energetic download, shall we say, and communion, if you want to use that word, with all that is.
And these are going to be the new forms of spiritual expression for humanity.
I think so, because again, look at, you know, I mean, when I started the idea of being a channel, I mean, that was just crazy, crazy, crazy. Now, at the very least, I'm not saying everyone accepts that it's a real thing, but it's still made its way into our language. It's like, oh, I'm channeling this, I'm channeling that. You know, so it's not so crazy anymore. People are beginning to understand it's a natural state of being. You're just getting into a state where you're making more connections, more associations. You're synthesizing information more efficiently, more quickly. You're downloading information from wherever, your own higher consciousness, your unconscious, your subconscious, whatever you want to call it. But it is a true altered state. And we've measured that, and we've done it scientifically. And we can see that there are differences in the brain when you're in a channeling state, which is called gamma. So it is becoming something that people understand. It's just like the idea of meditation. It's just like the idea of getting into a zone, and, you know, and stuff like that. It is an altered state. So I think we've learned that it's not so woo-woo, it's not so mysterious. And I think that's kind of where spirituality is going as well. It's like, okay, you know, I'm this spiritual being. I'm starting to think of myself more as a spirit having a human experience, rather than a human having a spiritual experience. And we're starting to open up to the idea that consciousness is not necessarily originate in physical reality, but is beyond that to begin with. So I think it's all blending together into a more direct relationship with existence, with all that is.
With Bashar, what is his experience with spiritual expression? I mean, I doubt that there's religion where he's at. No, there's nothing like that there. So what is it for him? What is he? Is it just direct connection all the time?
Just direct connection all the time. I mean, he has said, you know, if you want to think of our civilization, he said it's not a full picture to just imagine a bunch of aliens walking around on a planet in the science fiction sense. He said our daily reality is as if we're walking through multiple dimensions of a dream. He said, I can't even necessarily fully describe it to you. We interact with spirits. We interact with the universe. It's a direct experiential thing. He said, I mean, in the crudest way you could explain it is we're constantly on drugs. We're constantly hallucinating, but they know the hallucinations are real. So they are constantly experiencing things we would think of as hallucinations, but they're seeing the true multidimensional nature of existence, and they are walking through it every day. They're living it every day. They can see multiple dimensions. They can see spirit. They can see other kinds of beings. So for when he's describing ideas to us, when he's describing techniques to us, like the formula that he shares with all of us, he's saying, look, I'm not giving you a philosophy. I'm describing what I see in terms of how the universe is structured, how it works, how you create your reality experience. Just the same way that if you're holding a red rose and I ask you what color it is, you go, well, it's a red rose. I go, well, is that your opinion? Is that a philosophy? Is that a belief? No, I'm observing the rose is red. So that's what I'm giving you, is an observation. I'm giving you a description of something we can see. So it's much more than just a philosophy.
And his reality is not nearly as dense as ours.
Not at all. In fact, they're what they call quasi-physical. They have the traits of spirit and the traits of physical beings. So they are in their evolutionary path almost becoming a non-physical society. But they still have physicality to them.
And there are societies out there that are within just spirit, essentially.
There are societies that are just energy, just light, just energy beings. Yeah. Because again, that's what consciousness is to begin with.
But are they on this plane of existence or not? Different?
They can project themselves into this plane of existence, but they are not of this plane of existence. And so they can project into it, but are not of it.
Is Earth and our reality, it's like the toughest school there is out there?
It's a tough school. I'm sure there are tougher, but they have said it's rare. That's one of the reasons why there are so many extraterrestrials interested in what's going on here. It's like a master graduating class for souls. So the fact that we have chosen to experience such an incredible degree of limitation, and yet we can still transform out of it, is something magical and amazing to a lot of extraterrestrials. And they are watching very closely what's happening here, because what we're going through, if we are one of the toughest schools, then other civilizations can benefit from what we're experiencing and how we're transforming great limitation into freedom and darkness into light and negative into positive, because it's almost like they look at us and go, well, our challenges aren't anywhere near that great. And if they can do it, we can do it, because we're ahead of the game already. So if they have the ability to find the light from such incredible darkness, then they're a good illustration of how anything is possible.
Are we like the best reality show in the universe, essentially?
Yeah, in a sense, because I mean, somebody even directly asked Bashar that once. Says, like, do you have movies on your planet? He said, no, we just come watch you.
So there's no entertainment. There's no Deadpool over there. They just come over here and watch it.
Yeah, no, there's only over there.
So, all right, my next question is, how does Bashar interpret all the ongoing wars and conflicts going on in the world right now?
Well, I think we already discussed that. We're getting everything out of our system. We're getting everything out on the table so we can see, is this what we want to have? Do we want to continue this, or are we going to finally do something about addressing the causes of this instead of just looking at the symptoms and trying to put a Band-Aid on things? I mean, look at what's going on in the Middle East. It's, culturally speaking, it's like they're in a closed time loop. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm going to attack you. Now you have to avenge my attack. Now I have to avenge your vengeance of my attack. And now you have to avenge your vengeance of my vengeance. It just goes back and forth forever and ever and ever. because no one is actually stopping to address the causes of this. I think that's an exact reflection, an exact symbol of what's going on with our society, is we look at that and we get emotionally caught up in it, and then we react to the symptoms, and we never get beneath those to addressing, why are people like this? Why do we keep doing the same things for thousands of years? Why are we stuck in this loop? We have to address the underlying causes, which we do very slowly, generation after generation after generation. But we've come to a point now where we almost can't ignore. It's getting so bad, we almost can't ignore it anymore. It's like, we've got to do something about this, because we're just going to tear ourselves apart. I think that's the lesson that we're starting to learn by all of this stuff coming out all at once and feeling so overwhelming. If we don't do something about this, it's just going to fall apart. And I think to some degree, the idea of having these kinds of conversations helps with that. It opens up new possibilities for people, new perspectives for people to say, maybe there's another way here, and start really making choices that are more in alignment with what we truly are. So, you know, it depends on who we are and what we're brought up with as to how quickly we might latch on to that idea. But I do think there is change happening. But again, most of that will only be experienced by those willing to make positive changes and do something about it, as opposed to those who are not really willing or are afraid to look within themselves and just keep doing the same things over and over again. It's really kind of a psychological issue deep down.
Daryl, when you started channeling Bashar, at any point during that time, did he ever predict not only what was going to happen in the world, but also what was happening with you and where this whole thing was going to go? Because I got to believe in 82, 83, you're like, okay, I'm on board, but this is kind of nutty, and no one is really understanding what's happening around here. Like, you know, there was a leap of faith, but there's a certain point of like, what do I do?
Yeah, well, that was partly why I had been shown the UFO in 1973, because that started me, number one, realizing these things are real, because here it is in broad daylight, 70 feet away from me, so I can't deny that this thing exists. So having those experiences in 1973 is what made me do all the research, so that by the time 1983 came around, I would have enough understanding to go, well, yeah, many people probably see this as crazy, but I don't care, because I understand there's something to this, and I'm curious to see where this is going to go. And of course, now we know where it's gone 40 years later.
Did he ever give you anything in regards to what's happening in society in the future? Like, hey, like there's going to be this movement, there's going to be AI.
It's very rare. It's very rare. He has left breadcrumbs for me for my personal journey to figure things out. But it's very rare that he will make a prediction for society, because number one, he says there's no such thing as a prediction of the future. There are many probabilities. When someone makes a prediction, they may be psychically sensing the energy that exists at the moment the prediction is made of the present. And they're saying, if this energy doesn't change, this will unfold and it will manifest and it will come to pass. But predictions are predictions of the energy at the present. They're not of the future. They are warnings, or they are, announcements of what might happen, what might be probable if the energy doesn't change in this moment. So sometimes a prediction that doesn't come true doesn't mean that the psychic was wrong. It may mean simply that everyone said, we don't prefer that, let's change the energy. Whether they do that consciously or unconsciously doesn't matter. If the energy changes, then the prediction will not come to pass. However, the few times that Bashar has been willing to make predictions, it's, as he's explained it, because the energy momentum behind this is so powerful, it's unlikely to change direction. And therefore, they feel comfortable saying, look, we feel it's unlikely to change, so we're preparing you. for this because it seems like this will happen. So here you go. Now, the three that I can mention, number one was in 1998, and this is on a recording. In 1998, he said, but before the end of 2001, New York would have a terrorist attack. Obviously, that came true. Mm-hmm. The second one was, I think it was a year or two beforehand, he said, and this was obviously having to do with the elections in the United States. He said, in 2016, after 2016, everything will change. And things changed in 2016 and will never be the same. That has obviously come true. Look where we are today. The last prediction he has made, somewhere around the end of 2026 or the beginning of 2027, there will be some sort of a UFO event that will let humanity know we are not alone. Now, he won't say what that is, but he's basically saying this will be the true beginning of open contact, where you now have to consider the reality that there are others in the cosmos other than yourself. So somewhere at the end of 26, somewhere around the beginning of 27, something, some incident is supposed to occur that will kind of open our eyes to the fact that we're not alone in the universe. Again, he won't say what that is yet, but that's his latest prediction. And I've actually heard a couple of other psychics say something very similar, like open contact and disclosure and the introduction of ETs to humanity is only a few years away. It's really close. So it's been echoed by several other psychics independently. So something is happening that is happening in our consciousness that has made us ready for the first steps of contact, I think.
Well, if that does happen, from what you told me before, is like if BASHAR showed up today and walked off of a spaceship and walked towards us, we wouldn't be able to handle his frequency. Right. His frequency would be so much. I'm assuming that the contact that's coming is at a frequency that we can handle?
Yes. So it's something more similar to us, something that would be more humanoid, something we can handle at first, something of a frequency. And you have to also remember that I'm not saying that this event means they're going to land and step out.
Right.
It's an event. I don't know what that means, but we'll see. But
it could be in the front, the White House front lawn. It could be.
I doubt it.
I doubt it too.
Yeah, but it will be something that is unquestionable. So obviously they would know what they're doing, and it would be something we can handle. So, and even when beings are introduced, I think they will be of a type that's more genetically related to us, something we can relate to, something that's easier for us to take. And over time, we would be introduced to other species that are more different than we are. As we get used to the ones that are more like us, we can start to expand and say, okay, now let's look at the ones that are not so much like us. But they'll probably do it in a way that allows us the opportunity to gradually raise our frequency to match those frequencies later on as well. Because again, if they don't do it that way, it would make no sense.
What would humanity do? What's your opinion of what? I mean, if UFOs show up, I mean, we've been trained by movies in Hollywood, which you've been part of, actually literally making Star Trek. It's not possible to have the aliens come in who are going to take over, because their frequency has to be at a certain level to even be able to have that technology to even come here. So when that event happens, everything kind of goes away. The I hate you, you hate me. Listen, we're humans. We're not different countries. We're not different races. We're humans now, and we have something else out there, and we join. Is that what you think will happen?
Ultimately, yes. We will start thinking of Earth as our home as opposed to a specific country, I think, ultimately. And again, this is, I think, part of the reset that we talked about from 2020 to 2050. Over that 30-year period, I think at the end of it, we will be basically joining a galactic society in some way, shape, or form. Maybe on the bottom rung as new members, but nevertheless, becoming part of something much, much bigger that opens the doorway to humanity's evolution in a way that's never been done before. So I don't think that's really overly optimistic, because I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes here, both on Earth and from the aliens' point of view. And when that starts coming to light, I think people's eyes will be open to what's been going on all this time that we haven't been paying attention to. So I think we're going to see that over the next couple of decades. Yeah.
The thing is, it's just when you're saying these things out loud, it seems so out there.
Sure.
And I'm on board. I think this is something that's going to happen in one way, shape, or form. But it just seems so far removed from where we are right now as a society.
Here's the thing about that. We're talking about a fragment of society that feels this way.
Which way?
There are cultures that is going to be surprised by this.
Okay.
As if it hasn't existed before. There are cultures on the earth that have been having contact for thousands of years, like Native Americans and Hindus. They've been talking about this in their culture for thousands of years. But Western society has said these are just myths. People are just making crazy stuff up. So I think the biggest shock is going to be, this has actually been happening for a long time, and you're just becoming aware of it. That they've been here all along, coming and going, interacting with different cultures, different people in different ways throughout history. So as Bashar said, one of the gifts that you're going to be given as humanity when you do have open contact is your complete history of the things that you know nothing about that have happened on this planet for thousands of years, and you're going to be given the recordings of all of that stuff so that you know what your history is and what our relationship is. So that's going to be interesting to have that kind of information that goes back who knows how far to show us what's actually been happening on the planet all this time, and what was real, what we considered a myth actually did exist, and all this kind of stuff, like Atlantis and all that. So it's going to be interesting to see what is contained in those historical documents.
What is Bashar's take? Has he ever spoken about the Anunnaki? The Sumerian, in the Sumerian text, that the people who don't understand. Can you explain to who the Anunnaki is really quickly and what they've said?
The basic story is that hundreds of thousands of years ago, an extraterrestrial species came to Earth that we refer to as the Anu, or the Anunnaki in ancient Sumerian language. And basically they were mining for gold for a particular reason that had to do with something of using it to balance out the climate or some situation on their planet that had gotten out of balance. And it was a very large-scale task. They found that the group that came here wasn't necessarily sizable enough to achieve the task in the time frame they needed to, so they needed help. And they used their very advanced genetic technology to infuse their genes into the natural hominid that existed on the earth at the time, Homo erectus or what have you, and basically created Homo sapiens. And Homo sapiens were used as workers to help them mine the gold and all this. Now, a lot of this is supposedly what's couched in biblical phrases of, man being made in the image of God, because these ETs were looked at as gods because of their abilities and all this. But from what I understand, this group was not supposed to have done that. And that was kind of outside of their laws to have used their genes to create Homo sapiens as a new species, that we were supposed to be left to evolve on our own. And they accelerated all of that and changed all of that. And so they were recalled because, again, they had done something they weren't supposed to do. And from that point forward, the rest of the Anu society realized, okay, well, now that this group of beings, Homo sapiens, has been created, we're kind of responsible for them. So we're going to have to guide them for a while. We're going to have to see what they can do. We're going to have to help them a little bit, but then eventually we're going to have to kind of pull back, remain in the background, and see if they can make it on their own. So again, I think in a nutshell, that is the story of the Anu as it relates to the creation of Homo sapiens, and why there are such stories in ancient texts like the Bible of people being, you know, cultures being led through the desert by the pillar of fire and cloud, and Ezekiel seeing these, you know, this ring within rings coming down on a mountaintop, and interactions between humans and extraterrestrials as guides to help us build a culture that we would ultimately be able to sustain and take our place among, you know, the sentient beings of the galaxy. So
that's basically
that's not everything he said. That's the nutshell Reader's Digest version.
Because and for people to understand, this is in stone, in Sumerian texts, and clay tablets and things like that. So it's ancient history, and I always find it fascinating. I'm like, why would they sit down and write a story? It was tough writing back then.
They're recording what happened, basically. Now there's a lot of misinterpretations and misunderstandings and things that have been lost over time due to a variety of destructions on Earth and natural disasters and all that. So we don't necessarily have the whole story. It's not necessarily clear. So that's another reason why I think it's going to be so important that one of the gifts the ETs are actually going to give us is, here's the actual, we're going to fill those gaps for you. Here's the history. Now you have your entire history going back hundreds of thousands of years. And now you know where you came from, so now you know where you're going.
So we both understand human programming in the sense of ego, power hungry, scarcity. I doubt that this is all going to be wiped away the second they show up, because if they provide new technology or they provide this information, I can't believe our leaders are going to go, oh, thank God, let's just give, let's everyone kumbaya and get together. How long is this going to take for this transition?
A few decades, at least a few decades, if not longer. But again, that's the thing I was mentioning about the behind the scenes. There have been things going on for a while that people are not talking about. We're already more used to this than we think. So I think there already has been an exchange of technology. I think there has already been guidance to some of this. So I think when the rest of humanity sort of joins the club, I think one of the things we're going to be understanding is, yeah, we've been at this for a little while. And so we are now at a place where we feel comfortable telling you that we've already been ramping up for decades. But yes, it will take some time. Not everyone is going to jump on board. Not everyone, and a lot of people will probably freak out and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people won't. And again, this goes back to the thing about the splitting prism into different parallel realities. Those that just can't handle it, they'll go into a different reality where contact doesn't occur. Those that can handle it will stay in the realities where contact does occur. We don't all have to be subjected to the same thing.
Let's say that ETs show up and they knock on our door, and everyone's on CNN, it's on Fox, it's everywhere, and all of a sudden we have proof of there's something else out there. I gotta believe that's gonna throw a couple of ripples into religion.
Sure. There'll be ripples in every aspect of society. Of course there will be. Of course there will be. But again,
a lot of truths that we've been taught and programmed to believe are going to be thrown out the window, and that's a fairly jarring scenario.
For people that are willing to throw them out, yes. For people that are not, now we go back again to the parallel versions of Earth. I refuse to believe this. I refuse. It's not true. I'm going to stay in the direction of an Earth where it's not true. They will experience that. They will not have that exposure. They will not see those things. It will not happen in their version of Earth. If they are really in that much denial that it would really destroy their worldview, they'll create a worldview where they live in it and it has nothing to do with the worldview of other people who accept it. And it is literally a different world. Literally a different world.
There's a concept that's been tossed around a bunch by people, and people ask me this question, and I'd love to hear you and Bashar's take on it, is that there is a spiritual battle happening right now for humanity's quote-unquote soul and consciousness as it's going forward, the dark and the light and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't want to see it that way. I don't think Bashar sees it that way. He understands, again, like we've been talking about, that there are people who are giving over to fear as opposed to love. And therefore, you can say it's more of an internal battle rather than an external one. Okay. Everyone is playing a part. Everyone is on a path. Everyone is a path. And, you know, as a lot of ancient wisdom states, sometimes you need the darkness to see the light more clearly. So I wouldn't call it a battle. I would call it a play, a scenario, that by having negativity and having what appears to be darkness based in fear, it gives others an opportunity to see the light more clearly and head in that direction. I don't want to frame it or define it as a battle, because that in and of itself implies negative energy. So I'd see it simply more as the opportunities that soul has for growth, using fear in a positive way to move forward.
And Daryl, what advice do you and Bashar have for people that are struggling with all these changes that are happening in the world today?
I want to remind everyone, whether you know it or not, that we chose to be here because this is an exciting time of transformation and change. You are capable of experiencing great change in your life in a positive way. Being familiar with Bashar's formula does help, but there are many ways in which to do it. But not to in any way, shape, or form give up hope. To see what's going on again as a choice, to see more clearly what you do and don't prefer, and to move in the direction of what you really do truly prefer. And to understand that our greatest power is the freedom to choose. We have free will. Choose what you really prefer, and your life will follow suit. Life is our projection. How we define it is how we experience it. The universe doesn't contradict us. Creation and existence doesn't have a mind of its own in that context. It is unconditionally supportive. If you say, I'm going to define this thing negatively, creation says, okay, I support you unconditionally in your negative experience. But at the same time, if you say, I'm going to define it in a positive way that can help me and be of service to me and be of service to humanity, creation says, okay, I will unconditionally support you in that knowledge and in that belief and in that experience. It doesn't care. You're in charge.